from an American standpoint, the very strong view that there is no military solution to this crisis. This is a crisis which needs to be solved diplomatically.
That is U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt also saying that the U.S. would not recognize any outcome of a so-called referendum set to take place on Sunday. Protesters opposed to the vote on Crimea's secession from Ukraine made their voices heard outside the headquarters of Crimean TV stations today. Ambassador Pyatt added that the meeting between President Obama and the new Ukrainian Prime Minister would be an opportunity for the U.S. government to reaffirm strong support to Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. The White House meeting will focus on options to peacefully resolving Russia's military intervention in the Ukrainian region of Crimea.
And we are back and still joined by former FBI counterterrorism expert Chad Jenkins. Now, Chad, in addition to your time in the FBI, you're a warfighter, an Iraq veteran, a West Pointer. When you take a look at what has transpired now in the Crimea, in the Ukraine, Russians coming in saying to Ukraine military, why don't you guys just come with us? I mean, that dynamic of defect or flee or fight, those choices, not exactly sound military choices for the Ukrainians to be in a position to have to make.
Absolutely, but you look at the Russian stance versus the Ukrainian stance, specifically in Crimea. I mean, Russia is the 800-pound gorilla at that location right now, and I think there's a certain bit of you have to play your cards right as well if you're the Ukrainian military that's now being enveloped by the Russians. So defecting, yes, they are, but they do have such a close alliance with Russia, specifically in the Crimea region.
Now, we heard that ambassador say, in effect, that the military options don't really exist at this point, but at the same time, last week on this show, we showed video of a U.S. destroyer moving through the Straits of the Bosphorus. There's also reports about other naval assets being moved closer into the region. Is that just for show here in this situation?
Well, you never want to take military action off the table. I mean, especially as the United States, we have to keep that on the table, even if it's in a collateral planning type event. I think the powers that be in DoD are making those pre-planning execution stages right now.
But JD, we know, we've heard roundly from people writing into the show, they do not want anything that resembles military.
Not only do we hear that from our viewers, but we just heard it from the American ambassador there, saying that there's no military solution here. So I know that there are situation books in the Pentagon for every region of the world and virtually every scenario, but it would seem, Chad, that even if the goal was strategic ambiguity, there's not a lot of ambiguity being offered by our State Department or by our Defense Department right now.
Absolutely, but when you're talking about military, I mean, I'm not talking about us planning for an invasion of Crimea. I'm talking about what we can do in a tactical sense with warfighters on the ground who are specialized in training and helping bring up not only the Ukrainian forces, but Poland, other areas around that to beef up their capabilities in the event something were to spill over.
And can you give us any insight on what that might look like? And you were a specially trained fighter as an Army Ranger, but we have, Navy SEALs and other groups. Do you think there's active planning and preparation going on?
Well, if you look at the Green Beret, the Army Special Forces, that's their MO, is the training of indigenous forces in foreign countries. That's what they were brought up to do during the Vietnam era, and we fell away from that in Afghanistan and Iraq, but that is their true mission, so they would be the most logical unit to use in this scenario.
Chad, and I can appreciate that, but the politician in me and the historian says when people hear advisors and they hear Green Beret, they start thinking about the Vietnam experience, and so it does bring a wave of, whoa, hold back, that's how we got enveloped in other wars,
right,
quite frankly. What is the new wrinkle that would avoid that, even if we were to have some sort of exchange or bring the Green Beret to the Ukraine or to the Polish nation or other NATO allies?
Well, I think when you look at today's situation compared to the Vietnam era, I mean, we're in such an asymmetrical type environment. We can do direct action raids on the period of darkness with our own forces and get in and out as evidence in the Bin Laden raid in countries, and then pull back out and be safely tucked in bed that night. So I think that having that capability should be a little bit of comfort that we don't have to get deeply involved and put boots on the ground for indefinite periods of time.
So the asymmetrical warfare changes the whole concept, the strategy and doctrine, and even when we hear familiar words from the past, they're utilized in new ways. Last year at this time, we were hearing a lot about the Boston Marathon. You and I talked about this earlier in the week, and John, they're still afoot to change some plans there. I guess a big announcement later today.
Yeah, we're still waiting for a big announcement to come from the marathon officials. Obviously, they're going to make some changes to the security plan in light of what happened last year with the Tsarnaev brothers accused of that terrible bombing here, Chad. But, you know, obviously they want to make people feel safe, but they don't want to broadcast everything they're going to plan on changing. How much can we expect to learn when this announcement is made?
I think this is going to be a broad stroke of the security measures that are set in place. Everyone to comfort them to know that it is a safe environment, a safe venue to participate in and to be an observer at. I don't think there's going to be very granular detail on the exact measures that have been corrected since last year's unfortunate attack.
We don't want to hear any secrets, but I would imagine that those in the counterterrorism business behind the scenes will have a very structured approach and a more intensive approach to this year's Boston Marathon.
Absolutely. When you look at what has, what's leading up to this event, and that's going to be one of the biggest, I think the biggest security measure that the state of Massachusetts has ever had. So they're treating this with all eyes on, all focus on all individuals, boots in. So I think it'll be a secured environment without a doubt.
And a slight tie-in, maybe more than a slight tie-in with the situation in Eastern Europe as well. I would assume FBI and CIA assets are already looking into the radical Islamic elements in Eastern Europe as well.
Absolutely. JD and we talked about this last time. I mean, that's the international threat and that crosstalk between not only domestic organizations, but then our international friends is full force right now to determine that threat, because the threat has to be determined now.